Hello, stinkers. Today I'm here to talk about a kinda serious topic. Well, one that I never thought I'd find myself telling peeps about one day, that's for sure. But I was urged to do so by my boyfriend, who has always had a passion for psychology, as well as some dear friends who've known about my diagnosis. So, well, here we are. And just to clear the air, I'm not a psychologist, psychiatrist, MD, or anything even close. But hey, if I can educate my own psychiatrist about it while he gladly listens and learns and takes notes, then maybe I won't be too shabby at educating peeps on YouTube either. Besides, this is mostly for friends and family anyhow. So, DID, OSDD 1B, and of course, OSDD 1A2. Well, what do all of these have in common? Each of these has a D, stands for dick. Alright, no, I'm actually just kidding. Okay, I'm sorry. If I can't find some way to put humor into this relatively heavy video, then I may just pass away. Anyway, the D in DID stands for dissociative. Dissociative identity disorder. Same with OSDD, otherwise specified dissociative disorder. Now, you may or may not be wondering, what does dissociate mean? Well, that is the fundamentals of this disorder, and very important for understanding it. Basically, to dissociate is to escape one's situation via the vacating of the mind when things become all too much. Now, I'm really not great at explaining things, so maybe I'll just leave a screenshot of the internet's definition of dissociating here as well. So, what causes peeps to dissociate in the first place, you may be asking? Well, that's the thing, it's not really a choice. In most cases, it happens when someone is undergoing extreme or repeated cases of trauma, and their brain is trying to ease them by taking them away from their current situation and sending them elsewhere in their mind. Think about PTSD, for instance, a more commonly known mental disorder. With PTSD, you may think about people zoning out as they recall their non-war flashbacks, etc. It's almost become a meme of sorts. Well, there are a lot of ways to dissociate, and zoning out is just one of many. There is also the feeling of floating, the feeling like you aren't real, which starts to delve into depersonalization and derealization, and loads more. You may have even dissociated before during a stressful time in your own life and didn't even realize that's what it was. It's more common than you might think. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it all. Let's start with DID first, since it serves as a sort of umbrella-like term for OSDD. Basically, dissociative identity disorder can happen when a person who, at quite the young age, undergoes severe or repeated trauma and their mind was basically like, welp, can't handle this anymore, and splits. At such a young age, the child's mind is not yet fully put together, so their personality was not yet pieced together as a whole. All those pieces of themselves that would have normally turned into a functioning adult down the road split apart into even more pieces, which end up becoming their own identities, and those parts end up making pieces of a whole person while apart. Now do some of those wordies make sense? Dissociative identity? But wait, there is so much more! Sorry. It gets much more complex. See those parts I mentioned? They're actually referred to as alters, not personalities. In fact, that's an outdated term that goes all the way back to 1994, when the disorder's name was changed from multiple personality disorder to what it is now known as dissociative identity disorder. They changed its name in the DSM as it better reflects the symptoms of the condition. Well, you may find it intriguing to know that some, if not most, alters in a system actually serve a unique purpose, or role, if you will. So, what is an alter role? Well, this is where things can get a bit hazy as there is a lot to know and understand. Let's start off with why alter roles are even a thing at all. Remember how I was talking about how a young kid, pre-DID or OSDD, is going through all these severe, repeated traumas? Well, let's create a scenario to help it make more sense. Trigger warning ahead. Let's imagine that there's a young boy who's going through severe physical trauma, unfortunately. Their dad is berating them, beating them up, but they're just a 5-year-old kid. They don't know what to do or how to handle the situation. Well, maybe that kid really likes knights in shining armor. They're always so tough and strong, they can handle anything that's thrown their way. Heck, they can even best a scary, fire-breathing dragon. The child might think to themselves, I want to be like that knight, then I could handle anything. Well, their mind begins to create an alter, someone that can shield them from their trauma, or handle the situation better than they themselves could. This alter might feel physically stronger and tougher than the host does. They might even talk or act differently than the host does as well. That particular alter's role would be categorized as a protector, as it's meant to protect the host from dealing with further trauma. By the way, this is a very common alter, and it may be one that you've actually seen before in media that's trying to depict DID. In fact, in a Marvel TV show called Moon Knight, spoiler ahead by the way if you plan on watching it but haven't yet, Mark Spector is the host, and in a later scene, he's protected by Stephen Grant, who is a protector alter, and also an interject technically, in their system, who was meant to deal with the trauma related to his brother's passing. Their mom physically abuses young Mark as she blames him for the death of his deceased brother, and while it happens, he dissociates and switches out, and Stephen fronts in his stead, taking the trauma for him. So that's a good example of a protector role, and I'm sure there are other good examples in some other media, but, for me, that's just what comes to mind. And the protector role is just one of many. There are all kinds of roles that can be a part of a system. I will go over them all a little bit next. Now, let's discuss how DID differs from OSDD, and the distinct differences between OSDD 1B and 1A. All of these disorders are caused by the same thing, that being repeated or severe trauma, except obviously every situation is different and every victim is as well, resulting in a sort of spectrum that the victim's diagnosis may fall upon, being DID, OSDD 1A, and OSDD 1B. So let's start with DID, dissociative identity disorder. There are, of course, the other distinct identities of the person, aka the alters. There must be 2 or more alters for it to be considered a DID system, and there could be only a couple of alters, or even a couple hundred. At that point, though, it's apparently referred to as a polyfragmented system. Furthermore, DID can be characterized by disorientation or a lack of awareness when switching between alters, meaning you can have absolutely no idea what happens to you when you're no longer at the front, or have control of the body, and a different alter has control instead. DID individuals may find themselves in a new place when they front again, or they may experience severe amnesia. And let's not forget about dissociation, which is in the disorder's name, and can vary from person to person as I mentioned before. Dissociation can happen with or without switches between alters, and at any place and at any time, but particularly for those with DID, dissociation happens when one is triggered by something traumatic or something in their surroundings that reminded them of their trauma, or if they're just simply super stressed out. Now, let's get into OSDD. Otherwise specified dissociative disorder is a subtype to DID, characterized by its similarities in symptoms to DID, just not entirely meeting the full diagnostic criteria for DID. This can go one of 2 ways. If you're a system experiencing amnesia or memory lapses, but you do not have distinct enough dissociative parts that differentiate between themselves enough to be qualified as alters, then that's considered to be OSDD 1A. On the other hand, if you're a system that has no real memory lapses at all, or maybe just the occasional case of amnesia, but you still have distinct alters that you switch between, or maybe even rarely or never switch between at all, that can be considered OSDD 1B. There is a lot more I could go over with this disorder, but that's just the bare basics. As you now know, DID and OSDD are very complex mental disorders, but not without merit. They deserve gentle understanding, patience, and kindness, never mocking laughter or quick haste to judge. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this video, it's this. Never invalidate someone else's feelings or their trauma. Everyone processes things differently and has the right to the way they feel or the way they've been made to feel. No one can take that away from anyone. Respect it. Well, if you made it this far in the video, then I applaud you for your willingness to learn about something new. If it was new information for you, that is. If you'd like to leave a thumbs up on this video, then I would very much appreciate that. Sharing the video with others also helps a lot, as we need to get rid of the negative stigma surrounding these mental disorders. Well, have a good one, stinkers! Toodly toots!